Good morning, welcome to Headline Focus here live on Core Politics with me, Rob Double. It is Tuesday, the 24th of July 2018. Let's have a look at the political headlines on the final day of Parliament before the summer break, before the summer recess. And to start with quite a complicated and controversial story, which has been rumbling on since the start of the week, since really Sunday, and shows no signs of actually sort of reducing in importance and priority, because they report by The Telegraph today they've obtained a Whitehall document showing that the then Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson's advice to Home Secretary Sajid Javid on the day the decision was made to support the extradition of two individuals without demanding assurances the men would not be put to death. So this letter indicates that the then Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson did advise Sajid Javid that assurances were not needed or did not need to happen before these extraditions could be approved to the US. So let's just look at the actual wording. It says the Foreign Secretary considers that not seeking assurances could damage our ability to secure adequate assurances from the US and other countries in future, but agrees that the benefits outweigh the risks in this instance. It also claims in this Telegraph article that the death penalty assurances have been waived in previous cases, including under David Cameron's coalition government. Now, this is quite important in terms of the context of what previous government policy has been on this matter. We'll come into that in a minute. Let's just recap on the actual story. This is about two alleged IS, Islamic State members, who are potentially facing the death penalty in the US. The BBC reporting that US officials believe that they are part of an execution cell, an IS execution cell, that beheaded more than 20,000 Western hostages, reportedly, and tortured many more. They were dubbed, according to their hostages, the Beatles. They were a four-man group, and two of these individuals are the ones this story is based around. The story came from a leaked Sajid Javid Home Secretary letter, which said that the UK would not seek assurances over the death penalty in this particular case, relating to these particular instances of extraditing them to the US, but said, Sajid Javid said in this letter, it also did not mark a change in UK government policy. And this indeed was reiterated by Number 10, who said that a long-standing position of the government, it is a long-standing position of the government to oppose the death penalty in all circumstances as a matter of principle. And the BBC as well, there's a caveat to this, because the BBC are reporting that if the pair were extradited and then they were sent to the US military prison in Guantanamo Bay, the US would actually withhold intelligence to the UK would actually withhold intelligence over their trial because they do not agree with going to Guantanamo. So there are some caveats to this story. It's very complicated, but a very interesting story nonetheless. The context of it is that for many years, the British have sought assurances from foreign governments that the death penalty would not be used in cases where the UK provided information or extradited subjects. So it's very interesting at the moment. This is a confusion perhaps in the reports around what the UK government policy has been, and in this case it is at the moment. No doubt more lines on this and more clarity on this as the stories come through, but certainly expect some response from the Telegraph's latest development in this story today. Next up, good news for public sector. Public sector wage boost has been announced by the government on the last day of Parliament. Well, rather set to announce, I should say, it hasn't actually been announced yet, for about 1 million workers in the public sector: soldiers, teachers, police officers, doctors, prison officers, and the increases are reportedly between 1.5 and 3.5%. It's going to be announced in a series of written statements to Parliament today. Now, the important thing about this, though, is that the increases will not be funded by the Treasury, and that means there isn't actually going to be an increase in budget to account for this increase in wages. It's going to be governmental departments having to find these funds and use their own funds to make this happen, and that's going to obviously have implications in terms of budgeting within each department. So there is a sort of caveat to this story, which you need to know in terms of what the headline might imply and what actually is going on. In terms of the history, this has been a legacy of Theresa May's government already, because last year she announced she was going to plan to lift the 1% pay cap for the public sector, and in fact the public sector pay cap has been in place since 2013, but the deals which have been announced up until this point have only been confirmed for some NHS workers, prison staff and the police, and actually the pay deal for the NHS which was announced in March was promising a 6.5% increase in 3 years. Now, that did exclude some NHS staff, which are now going to be included in this next public sector pay boost. So it's a significant story, no doubt the government putting it out there to end Parliament on a positive spin note for them. But big story there, and certainly if you remember in the 2017 election, the importance of the idea of public sector pay caps and the lack of real wage growth in the public sector as a key electoral issue, which Theresa May arguably was hampered on, particularly when dealing with questions from the public, most memory from a nurse at the Prime Minister's Q&A or question time. Finally, one more story then, as I've alluded to, it is the final day that Parliament is in session for this summer. It breaks up for a 6-week summer recess. And good news for Theresa May, she survived the 2017 and 18 parliamentary year, despite many reports that she was on a knife edge, that letters were handed in against her for a vote of no confidence. She has had a pretty turbulent time. Seven cabinet ministers have had to leave their posts, either resigned or had to leave, owing to reports and scandal. The key summer questions which we're going to be looking at in terms of core politics is, will May survive as leader over the summer going into the next parliamentary session? And that links to the second key issue we're going to be looking at, and you should be looking at over the summer whilst the Parliament is not in session, is what's going on with Brexit, and will Brexit be the success that the government's trying to make it out to be? Of course, the government are going to be very busy over the next 6 weeks trying to sell the Chequers agreed summit, Dominic Raab, and of course the Prime Minister, but also many of the other cabinet members as well, including the new Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, who was in Germany yesterday giving a speech to the same kind of tune. These are going to be the key stories to look out for. We're going to be giving you as much of that news as possible over the next 6 weeks and giving you our take on what's going on. So we're still going to be doing these headline focuses. We probably won't be doing them every day because every day might be a little bit dry if there's not much happening. But on the key days, at least twice a week, we'll be coming and bringing you the latest summary of the political agenda. But that's it for us for this recess. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back again probably end of the week around about 9 o'clock. But from me and all the team here at Core London, and particularly the team at Core Politics, thanks a lot for watching us the past parliamentary recess. See you again in the next few days.